further ado, I promise to make as much time as available to Mike. I'm going to introduce Mike and make him welcome back to Kansas City. He is one of our native sons, and we're glad to have him home. So Mike, thank you so much for your willingness to do not one, but 2 sessions with us. We're glad to have you, and I'm going to turn it over to you. Great to see you.
Tracy, thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here, and actually glad to be back here in Kansas City. I started out in Jacksonville, Florida, and I was there until the Super Bowl, and I said I better come back. So I'm glad I got back here just in time for this. But this is really important information to get to our restaurants. A couple things to know. Today, it was announced that the website of restaurants.sba.gov, that's where you'll make your applications. That's going to go live for people to register this Friday, April 30th. So on that particular website, restaurants.sba.gov, you can actually go there and start registering your name. You get your passwords, get your user IDs, go and registering. The actual site, that same site, goes live on Monday where you can start applying. And I'll get some more information on that. But on Monday, May 3rd, you can actually start applying for these grants. A thing to know about that is that the grants will be funded for a select group for the first 21 days. And after that, it will be open to everyone. But with that in mind, keep that restaurants.sba.gov. That's where you'll be able to register. For information on what we're doing, another website, sba.gov. And on the sba.gov, you'll see at the very, on the page, the thing that says COVID-19 relief options. Just click on that. It'll take you to a section called RRF, for the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. And everything I'm talking about today, you can find on that particular website in that particular location. So without further ado, why don't we go ahead and go through the PowerPoint. Okay. Now, the American Rescue Plan Act, it became public law on March 11, 2021, and it actually established the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. Throughout this presentation, I'll call it the RRF. The ARPA appropriated $2.6 billion for the RRF, authorizing the SBA to award funds to restaurants, caterers. We'll go over those that are eligible. The appropriations will remain available until it's fully expended. The fund must be used for eligible uses no later than March 11th, 2023, and we'll go over what those eligible uses are. Anyone who got a PPP loan, it's basically going to be the same thing as far as eligible uses. Next slide. Okay, this is kind of small, but here's who's eligible. Restaurants, food stands, food trucks, food carts, caterers, bars, saloons, lounges, taverns, snack and non-alcoholic beverage bars, including coffee shops, ice cream shops, bakeries, brew pubs, breweries, wineries and distilleries, inns, licensed facilities or premises of a beverage alcohol producer where the public can taste, sample, or purchase the product, or other similar places of business in which the public or patrons assemble for the primary purpose of being served food or drink. The thing to remember here, places like where there's asterisks, like the inns, the wineries, the breweries, the brew pubs, on those particular things, you got to show that your revenue that you generate, 33% of that is generated on on-site sales to the public. Next one. Okay, the SBA may provide funding up to, not everyone's going to get $5 million, but it'll provide up to $5 million per location, not to exceed $10 million total for the applicant and any affiliated businesses. And we'll go over that. The minimum award is $1,000. Next one. Okay, for those who have ever done federal contracting, you'll get this, but those who have not, you'll be glad this did not happen. Applicants do not need to be registered in SAM.gov, and SBA will not require a DUNS or CAGE identifier. Again, that's stuff that people who've done federal contracting would be very familiar with. Valid unexpired I-10s are acceptable, but you will need to get that up to date. Any information regarding I-10s or questions that you have about that, you will need to go to irs.gov. That's basically their bailiwick in this process. Next slide. Okay, entities are ineligible if any of the following apply. It cannot be a state or local government operated business. As of March 13, 2020, owns or operates together with any affiliated businesses more than 20 physical locations. That's going to be important to know. It's got to be a physical location, regardless of whether those locations do business under the same or different names or in different industries. If anyone has a pending application for the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant, you're not going to be eligible. If you're a publicly traded company, if you're permanently closed, and what's important about that, some people have temporarily closed and opened back up, you'll still be eligible. But if you permanently closed, you're not going to be eligible. If it's a nonprofit organization, you're not eligible if you're requesting funding of less than $1,000. Next one. Okay, these are the forms of organization. You can be an S corporation, C corporation, a partnership, an LLC, a sole proprietor, self-employed, an independent contractor, a tribal business, or an LLC taxed as an S corporation or sole proprietor. Okay, next one. Okay, any business concerned operating as a franchise and meeting all other program requirements is also eligible. The franchise must be listed on the SBA franchise directory in the application portal. That's at restaurants.sba.gov. You will be able to look up your entity on the SBA franchise directory. For brands not listed on the directory, including brands that have been previously denied listing on the directory because of affiliation issues, the franchisor must submit the franchise disclosure document or other agreement and all other documents a franchisee is required to sign to franchise@sba.gov for review of SBA's other eligibility criteria. Okay. Bankruptcy. You are going to be eligible if you've been bankruptcy provided if you're operating under an approved plan of reorganization, either under Chapter 11, Chapter 12, or Chapter 13 bankruptcy, and meet all other program requirements. You will be eligible for funding. An applicant is not eligible if it has permanently closed, filed a Chapter 7 liquidation bankruptcy, or filed either a Chapter 7, 11, 12, and 13 bankruptcy, but is not under an approved plan of reorganization. Again, permanently closed does not include businesses who temporarily close their doors due to state or local restrictions or other pandemic causes, but are still in operation or have reopened. Next one. Okay, these are other relief programs and how they fit. Payroll Protection Program, PPP. Any funds already received through the PPP program will be subtracted from the applicant's final funding amount. Applicant is verified using the EIN, I-10, or SSN associated with his PPP loans. If the applicant received a PPP loan, the applicant must use the same EIN number for its RRF application as it is used in its PPP application. I know there's a lot of consonants going on here, but I'm trying to go as slow as possible. Okay, if an applicant applied for his first draw PPP loan for multiple locations under one EIN and subsequently applied for second draw PPP loan under different EINs, the applicant must provide the EINs for each entity that received second draw PPP loans. Upon applying for RRF, the applicant must withdraw any outstanding PPP application. In other words, you can't have both. Okay. You're going to have to attest. All applicants must certify that certain economic uncertainty makes the funding request necessary to support ongoing or anticipated operations. This information will be in the actual application itself. Okay. Okay, this is a little small, so I'll try to read these out. Anyone that's got a PPP loan will be familiar with this. This is the eligible use of the funds once you get the grant. You can use it for business payroll costs, including sick leave, business utility payments, business maintenance expenses, business supplies, including protective equipment and cleaning materials, business food and beverage expenses, including raw materials, covered supplier costs, business operating expenses, including insurance, marketing, fees, licenses, legal, POS equipment, etc. The POS equipment is basically those who use Square, Clover, Aloha, and those type of things to download the payment. Construction expenses. For the most part, you cannot use this money for construction expenses except for those who had to construct outdoor seating because of local restrictions. That will be eligible. Expansion costs will be ineligible. Business debt. Payment, you can use the funds for payments on any business mortgage obligation, including principal and interest, but you can't use it for prepayment of principal or interest. The same holds true for your other business debt. Both principal and interest are eligible, but any payment for any prepayment of principal and interest will not be eligible for your business debts. Next one. Okay, the funds must be spent on expenses that are incurred between February 15th, 2020 and March 11th, 2023. So if you have expenses that occurred before February 15th, 2020, like February 14th, it will be eligible. It has to be February 15th and after until March 11th, 2023. Now, if the business permanently closes after receiving their funds, the covered period will end when the business permanently closes or on March 11th, 2023, whichever occurs sooner. Any funds not spent on eligible expenses by the time the covered period ends must be returned to the government. Next one. Use of funds assessment. Now, when you're using the funds, you're gonna have to keep detailed expenditure reports. After the total awarded funds have been exhausted, the entities must provide a detailed expenditure report and certification for the required period. So you keep your receipts, keep track of what you're spending and write it down. Until the applicant completes the use of funds assessment, beginning December 2021, applicants will be required to provide a self-reported, unaudited data detailing use of the distributed funds each year through 2023. So if you get the funds and say you use it all by the end of 2022, you will not need to file a 2023 report. Or if you've used it all by this year, you will not need to file a 2022 or 23 report. But keep careful track of how you spend the funds, and if you can, and be sure and document it all. Okay, SBA will provide additional guidance that outlines the detailed reporting requirements and procedures in the coming weeks. Next one. Calculations. Big question. How much money do I get? Okay. This is the simple solution is calculation one. There's 3 different calculations. Under calculation one, basically what you'll do, these are for those applicants who have been in operation prior to January 1st, 2019, which will be the majority of those folks who are going to apply. Basically, you'll take your 2019 gross receipts minus your 2020 gross receipts minus your PPP loan amounts. A lot of folks are going to ask, what's a gross receipt? Again, that website, sba.gov, COVID-19 relief options, go to the restaurant revitalization fund information. There's definitions in there about everything and what it means. Next slide. Calculation number 2. These for applicants that began operations partially through 2019. You take your average monthly gross receipts times 12 minus your 2020 gross receipts minus PPP loan amount. Basically, say for instance, it's got to be a full month. So basically, you're in operation for the full months of June through December. That's 6 months. Add them all up and check out the average for your months. And then you times that times 12. Then you minus your 2020 receipts minus your PPP loan amounts. Applicants that began operations partially in 2019 may choose to use calculation 2 or upcoming calculation number 3. However, remember, calculation number 3 could require longer processing times, and why that's important. We're not sure how long this money is going to last. So the longer it takes you to get your application in, that's a business decision that you'll have to make. Next one. Calculation number 3. These for applicants that began operations on or between January 1st, 2020 and March 10th, 2021, and applicants not yet open but have incurred eligible expenses as of March 11th, 2021. You'll take the total amount spent on eligible expenses between February 15th, 2020 and March 11th, 2021, minus 2020 and 21 gross receipts minus PPP loan amounts. Now, applicants that began operations partially in 2019 can choose this calculation or calculation number 2. Calculation 3 will require longer processing times because basically they're going to have to verify whatever information you send in. The other calculations you can use audited tax returns or your filed taxes or your POS report, so it's verified by a third party. This one, the SBA will have to verify it, so it's going to take a little longer. Next one. Okay, what do you exclude from your 2020 gross receipts? Do not include any of the following 2020 gross receipts. Your PPP loan, either whether it's first draw or second draw received in 2020 or 2021. Do not include SBA Section 1112 payments. The banks will know about that. Do not include any of this idle loan you got, idle advance loan you received, a target idle advance loan, or any other funds received via the CARES Act. You do not include any state or local business grants that you received, and do not include any Randolph-Shepard Act financial relief and restoration payments appropriation. Again, if you didn't get it, you probably don't know what it is. Probably that doesn't apply to you. Okay. Okay, how do you apply? Again, we talked about that. The application page is restaurants.sba.gov. Again, you can start applying as of this Friday. I mean, you can start registering. Sorry, big difference. You can register as of this Friday. You start applying as of this next coming Monday on May 3rd. You can apply through a point of sale vendor. Again, that's like Clover, Square, Aloha. Those particular vendors, you can apply through them, and they've signed agreements with the SBA, so we're expecting that. And hopefully they have the platforms ready for you to apply through. Or you can apply through the telephone at 844-279-8898. A lot of folks say, why not just apply it through the telephone? Well, you can, but a best practice, because if you apply to the phone, we're gonna have to mail you the application. And the way the mail is running nowadays, you got to count the mail getting to them. You're talking 2 or 3 days for that. You have to fill the application out, then you have to mail it back. So you're counting on, again, some delayed time. While you're doing that, everyone else is putting theirs online through either the restaurants.gov or to the point of sale vendor. So you got to look at what your competition doing. And this particular $28.6 billion is not just for Kansas, it's for Missouri, it's for every single of all the 50 states and territories. And that's not just for restaurants, it's for all the caterers, the food trucks, all the ones that we talked about earlier. So everybody's going to be applying. And most folks are going to apply as quickly as they can. But it's your business decision. Next one. Here's the documents that you need. Again, all this stuff, I'll go over it. It's on that the website, sba.gov. It's on that website. That will tell you what you need to apply for. But basically, you'll need an SBA Form 3172, which is the application. It's got to be completed, initialed, and signed. And completion of this form, you can complete this form digitally on the SBA grant platform, and this will satisfy this requirement. We need verification of tax information. IRS Form 4506-T can be completed and signed by the applicant. Completion of this form digitally on the SBA grant platform will satisfy this requirement, and this will be available on the application. Gross receipts documentation. This gets a little hairy, but you got to take some time looking at it. But basically, any of the following documents demonstrating gross receipts and, if applicable, eligible expenses. Business tax return. Hold on a second, turn this off. Gross receipts documentation. You need business tax returns, which is IRS Form 1120 or IRS Form 1120-S. IRS Form 1040 Schedule C, IRS Form 1040 Schedule F. For a partnership IRS is Form 1065, including K-1s. Bank statements, and externally or internally prepared financial statements, such as income statements or profit and loss statements. Or again, POS reports, including IRS Form 1099-K. We're going to go over a little more detail on a couple of those. Next one. Okay, for calculations 1 and 2. This is required. You need your application form, SBA Form 3172, tax verification, IRS Form 4506-2. Basically, what that form is what we send the IRS, giving us permission to get your tax returns. Your 2019 gross receipts tax returns, 3 months of bank statements. What's important about those bank statements, if you apply, like say in May, we'll need your previous 3 months. So we probably need your April, your March, and your February bank statements. We need gross receipts, 2020 gross receipts of one of the next two. The preferred one to send in for us is your federal tax returns that are filed, or a point of sale report, because that's a third party verifier for us. So we'll be able to get to those processes a lot quicker. We will accept, but this may delay the review past 14 days, externally or internally prepared financial statements, such as income statements or P&L statements signed, dated, and certified as to the accuracy by the applicant, but we'll have to verify it, so it may take a little longer. Next slide. For calculation number 3, again, it's real small. Again, required, we'll need the SBA application, Form 3172, tax verification, IRS Form 4506-T. Again, your 3 months of bank statements, 3 months prior to when applying, with supporting account linkage validation. Your 2020 and 2021 gross receipts, at least one for each year. Preferred, your 2020 federal tax returns filed, your 2020 federal tax returns prepared but not yet filed. A 2020 point of sales report, a 2021 point of sales report. Eligible expense documentation, we need at least one, and required appropriate supporting documentation for these specific eligible expenses. You need one type. The preferred type is a CPA comfort letter. That's basically a letter that a CPA writes that it's a certain, I guess, an accounting term, but a comfort letter, your CPA or accountant should know what that is. If the applicant submits expense related to the following categories, we need the appropriate documentation, like a payroll documents, your 941s, outdoor seating expenditures, both invoices and payments, and business debt. For that, we need the lender or the loan statement. Accepted, again, this is going to be accepted, but may delay it past 14 days. Externally or internally prepared financial statements, such as income statements or P&L statements, signed, dated, and certified as to the accuracy by the applicant. If the applicant submits expenses related to the following categories, we need the appropriate documentation, including payroll documents, your 941s, outdoor seating expenditures, the invoices and payments, and business debt, basic lender loan statements. Next one. It's a lot of information, but we're getting through it. For those, there's additional documentation you may need. In addition to the documents we just went over, for applicants that are brew pubs, tasting rooms, tap rooms, breweries, wineries, distillery, bakeries, we'll need documents evidencing that on-site sales to the public comprise at least 33% of your gross receipts for 2019, which may include tax and trade bureau forms, state or local forms filed, or internally created reports from inventory management, sales reporting, or accounting software. For businesses that opened in 2020, the applicant's original business model should have contemplated at least 33% of gross receipts in on-site sales to the public. For applicants that are in, it's very similar. Documents that evidencing that on-site sales of food and beverage to the public comprised at least 33% of gross receipts for 2019. For businesses that opened in 2020, the applicant's original business model should have contemplated at least 33% of gross receipts in on-site sales of food and beverage to the public. Next slide. Okay, how do you get help? There was the hotline, 1-844. We'll leave it up here for a second. 279-8898, and I'll repeat it. 1-844-279-8898. You can call local SBA offices. The way to do that, sba.gov/local-assistance. Now, just again, being realistic here, our office here in Kansas City, and different offices have different areas. My area includes all of Western Missouri, all the way down to Springfield up to the Iowa border. I also include about half of Kansas, the eastern side. So we'll be dealing with all the restaurants, bars, food trucks, lounges in those two areas. So feel free to call us, but if we don't get back to you right away, there's a reason for that. We're dealing with all those particular entities. But the good thing about this, as we mentioned, if you go to sba.gov, click on COVID options, everything I'm going over here is in that section. You can find everything that you need there, and any question you may have is probably going to be there. So that's probably what, if you ask us a question, that's probably where we're going to go to get your answer. And what's great about this is things going to be available in multiple languages. In fact, it's estimated we're going to have 31 to 32 different languages will be covered in this particular area. In fact, when you call, you'll definitely find someone in English, you'll find someone in Spanish, but all the other languages will have interpreters available to assist in filling out these applications or answering your questions or walking you through it. Okay, next one. Best practices, best way to get through this. Provide complete documentation. Applications with incomplete documentation are going to be rejected. which is going to put you behind. The review process will restart when complete documentation is provided. Delays could jeopardize the applicant receiving the award. I guess we all have our parents to tell us, if you don't have time to do it right the first time, you won't have time to do it right the second time. So take your time. I know you want to get it in, but be sure you have, that's why it's good having an accountant, someone to help you, be sure that you got a complete documentation. Leverage your resources. While it's not required, the use of CPAs or other accounting professionals can help ensure a complete and well-documented application. Application corrections. The SBA is not going to be able to make corrections on behalf of an applicant. Applicants who require correction will need to contact the call center hotline at 844-279-8898. And also those applicants who still want to apply for a PPP. RF applicants are advised to complete your PPP application in advance of your RRF application. Next one. When can you apply? Now this is important. There's been a pilot period that's been going on the last week or so, where the SBA picked 1,000 people randomly, and they've been going through the application process. They did not receive any funds. They kind of help go through the process so they can give SBA best practices, what works, what's not working. They've received nothing. The big dates is going to start this Monday. From this Monday on, starting Monday, for 21 days, the initial 20-day one will be a 21-day priority period. SBA will accept applications from all eligible applicants, but only applicants from small businesses owned by women, veterans, and socially and economically disadvantaged applicants will be funded during this period, and we'll go over what those mean. On day 22, all eligible applications will be processed and funded until the program funds are exhausted. Okay? So again, remember, you can start this Monday, but if you're not one of those priority groups, you will not be, you can apply, but you won't be funded. Now, a small business concern that is at least 51% owned and the management and daily operations of the applicant are controlled by one or more individuals for women, veterans, or socially and economically disadvantaged. Applicants must self-certify on the application that they meet eligibility requirements. For example, an applicant that has 5 owners who each own 20% of the applicant. 2 owners are veterans, and 1 owner is a socially and economically disadvantaged individual. That's 60%. SBA will consider this applicant to meet the requirement that at least 51% of the applicant is owned by a priority group. So you can combine them. Next one. Okay, a socially disadvantaged individual are those who have been subjected to a historically racial or ethnic prejudice or cultural bias based on their identity as a member of the group without regard to the individual qualities. Individuals who are members of the following groups are presumed to be socially disadvantaged: Black Americans, Hispanic Americans, Native Americans, including Alaska Natives and Native Hawaiians, Asian Pacific Americans, subcontinent Asian Americans. Those folks, if you're in those 3 groups, you're going to be presumed to be socially disadvantaged, and you will be in that prior group. Okay, now economically disadvantaged individuals is a different, for lack of a different standard you got to meet. These individuals are those socially disadvantaged individuals whose ability to compete in the free enterprise system has been impaired to diminished capital compared to others in the same business area who are not socially disadvantaged. Okay, this one it gets a little complicated on reading it, but that should be available in the application process when you go through it. But basically, what they've told us is that those who are LGBT or disabled, they will be socially disadvantaged, but they still have to show their economic disadvantage. So that, again, information on that should be in the application when it goes live. Okay, next one. Okay, this is important. A lot of folks are out there thinking, oh, you know, maybe I'll just switch myself to an Hispanic-owned company, to a Black-owned company, a veteran. If you're not, don't do it. Kind of stay with where you are, because entities that reorganize for purposes of qualification for the priority period will result in automatic disqualification of an award. Particularly if you apply for a PPP before, we have your information already and your EIN, so just don't do it. It's not worth it. Okay, next one. Okay, set-asides. Of that $28.6 billion, there's going to be some set-asides. $5 billion will be set aside for applicants with 2019 gross receipts of not more than $500,000. An additional $4 billion is set aside for applicants with 2019 gross receipts from 500,001 to 1.5 million. That includes, that will cover a lot of folks right there. An additional 500 million will be set aside for applicants with 2019 gross receipts of not more than $50,000. Okay, the SBA reserves the right to reallocate these funds at the discretion of the administrator. If that should happen, you'll get plenty of notice. Okay, next one. That's basically it. I know it's a lot of information. I'm more than happy to take some questions, but can we bring up that website I've been referring to, the SBA.gov? Okay, if you look at that website, that's the SBA.gov website. You see on the left-hand side where it says COVID-19 relief options, learn more. You can click on that, or you can click on the yellow at the very top, which says learn more, either one. You go to the far right, you see a restaurant revitalization fund. You click on that. And under that content, you'll see program details, supplemental documents, and go to supplemental documents. You'll see all the information I provided is under supplemental documents. In fact, there's a PDF you can download or print out to tell you all the information. There's also information about upcoming webinars and other district office information and knowledge and more support documents that'll help you get through this. So everything I went through in this particular PowerPoint, and I believe they're gonna post it. Just go and look through that as well. Okay, at this time, I guess we can go for questions.
Yes, fabulous. Well, Mike, thank you so much. That was a lot of information in a short period of time. And I know many of you were probably taking a ton of notes. We will send you out all of this, the slide deck, all of this information, so that in case you missed something, you'll have both Mike's slides as well as the information, the links to the websites. Mike, we did get some questions. So I know some of questions were addressed at least a little bit in your presentation, but I want to make sure that we get clarity on some of these specifics. So let's dive right in, and for the rest of you, if you have additional questions, go ahead and put those in the chat, and we'll get to those as well. So the first one is really specific as to tax returns. And so this person says, when asked to provide a tax return for 2020, what can they use if they've filed for an extension and will not be filing until August? Although it sounds like they've already prepaid all those monies that they anticipate that they will owe. So the sample application uses the term, quote, as reported or to be reported on your 2020 federal tax return. On the first line of the application, it doesn't give that option. It says, as reported on your 2019 federal tax return, and additionally requires giving permission through a form 4506T for a transcript of the tax return. So it sounds like being filed is critical, but there might be some other options, perhaps if they have copies of all of their Kansas and Missouri sales tax returns through QuickBooks reports. So I think their question is, what are their options? And I had a couple of pre-submitted questions about if they have filed for extensions.
Well, that one's is a little bit more involved. Can you send me that question? Because that's so involved, and I don't want to give tax advice. Won't do that.
Absolutely. Well, I anticipated that, but I wanted to make sure. I see a couple of people smiling that this might be their question as well.
So I'll send that up to headquarters. I need to actually look at that question so I can see it and read it. It's hard for me to follow along with all that. So if you can send that to me, I'll look at that.
Okay, and to the person who had that question, we'll make sure that we send your contact information so that Mike can respond directly to you, or have someone do that for you. Another question is on the sample application. This person was a sole proprietor from 1988 and then incorporated in 2012. And so their question is, what date do they use as to when they began making sales? Do they use the 1988 date or their incorporation date of 2012?
I guess whatever their last business entity is, I would think that would be the one they would use, because you're right now you're not a sole proprietor anymore. You're probably you're incorporated. So I think that's where you are. So I would think that's the one you would probably want to use.
Okay, great, thank you. Another asks the difference, I guess this goes to who the actual applicant is. After the optional applicant demographic information, the application asks for the name of the authorized representative of the applicant. I am presuming, since I am doing this myself, I leave that section blank. Is that correct?
I would think they're probably if you're the authorized, you're the one filling out the application, you're probably the authorized person filling out the application. I would, if you're, there's no one else that's going to be authorized to speak on behalf of the application, I would think you would be the authorized applicant. So don't leave it blank, just fill it out. I wouldn't leave it blank.
Okay. This next question, we had several people submit something similar to this. This goes as to what the covered costs are when you were talking about business expenses. We had several people ask whether or not you can include alcohol sales and losses as a business expense.
But just that, and alcohol sales is part of your raw. I'm sorry. It's going to break up. So I would think alcohol sales, that's part of your covered cost. That's a raw material thing in sales. That would be eligible. That would be an eligible expense.
Okay. You were breaking up just a little bit. I want to clarify that you said that would be a covered business expense. Okay.
I would think your alcohol is a material of something you have to buy for your, like buying food.
Mike, I'm sorry. Can you repeat that? I think you broke up a little bit.
I would think that your alcohol would be covered. It's like buying food for your restaurant. That would be a covered cost. Because if you're a bar or a lounge, you've got to buy alcohol to survive. So that would be a covered cost.
Okay, perfect. As long as we're talking about covered costs, we also have a question about someone who opened in February of 2021. Would they include construction cost in addition to rent incurred during the build out?
I would think rent for sure, but the construction cost, we've got to see what it was constructed for. It can be for expansion, so we have to see you have to see exactly what that actually was for.
Okay. Another question regards the application amount. Once they've done that calculation, is the application amount the same amount that they will actually receive if they're eligible?
It should be. Like I said, you take your say for the simplest calculation, 2019 minus 2020 minus your PPP, that's your grant amount. And you've got, as long as you use it, you can have access to it as long as you use it for eligible expenses.
Okay. Another question that is a little bit related to the construction cost. However, this is for a new restaurant that opened in February of 2021. When listing expenses, would they include construction costs and rent?
I have to look at what it says. I mean, just again, go to that part of the website, look what the eligible costs are. And again, you got to look at if you open in 2021, I have to see if that's even going to be covered.
Okay.
Go back and look at the dates that they put out there. Again, it's on that particular page that I've reflected. That's where I'll have to go back and look.
We would encourage a new restaurant to really look at those dates, and you know, I'll send that question to you.
And just a new restaurant that incurred expenses during the covered period time. I mean, if you're just a new restaurant opening up, it's probably not going to cover you. But if you've got expenses during the covered period time, you may be eligible for some stuff. But again, you have to subtract into your revenues for 2020 or 2021. So I'm not sure what that's going to cover, but so feel free to apply.
Another question about expenses: can funds be used for business vehicles?
I mean, you have to look and see what the expenses are. I didn't see that on the expense part. In what way expense as far as gas, buying gas and insurance, sure. But buying a new car, I'm not sure if it would cover that or not. I'd have to find that out. I guess does that mean buying a new vehicle or paying for the expenses of a vehicle?
Okay. And can we go back to the discussion about inns? I've had several inquiries about hotels. We have a number of hotels in our region, and many of them rely upon food and beverage through their group business, which of course came to a screeching halt. So can you provide a little bit of clarity around that? So the 33 1/3 calculation and what's entailed in that.
Well, first of all, it can't be a publicly traded hotel. It's got to be a a private hotel. So if it's publicly traded, you're not going to be eligible. But I think they're going to look at you can't have more than 20 locations, physical locations that you're associated with, and basically they're going to be looking at your on-site sales. I mean, what kind of how much have you sold to the public? Either your beer, wine, your food. That's basically what they're contemplating on that. Because again, this thing is for a pandemic, and people were hurt by the pandemic because they couldn't do on-site sales. That's kind of what they're looking at. I had an example. Some asked for a grocery store is eligible. Grocery stores don't sell, for the most part, some do, don't sell food that you can eat through online, either at the premises itself, or drink that you can eat that you can drink at the premises itself. You normally buy this to take home. So, and the hotel and inns, their main business normally is for people to stay at their locations. So that they're contemplating, what are you selling on site? And what is you look at your what did you contemplate when you first opened it? I hope that clarifies a little bit, but look at your on-site sales. Again, this is all, it's explained in more detail on the page I gave out.
So hopefully that clarifies that a little bit for the hotels that are on the line, looking at on-site sales, and those need to be 33 1/3% of total
revenue. Yep.
Before subtracting any PPP.
Yep.
Okay. Let's see. And I think this was answered by way of looking at the set-asides. Are there specific funds that are set aside for the minority businesses for the 21 days, or is it just the fact that the 21 days is a priority period? There isn't specific funding set aside for those.
Well, there's specific funding set aside number-wise for those that make less than 50,000, those that make 500,000 to up to 500,000, and those that make 500,000 to 1.5 million. That's a specific set aside. Then there's a priority period where all people can still all apply, but only those in the minority groups, veterans, women, Native Americans, they're the ones that can be funded during that 21-day period. That's a priority period for the priority groups.
Okay, so just wherever they happen to fall within those revenue categories, because just because they fall into the 21-day period doesn't necessarily mean they're in a lower revenue category. They could be in one of the higher revenue categories. And so they can take that funding from whichever one of those categories they're in.
Correct. So so say for instance, everybody used all the funds up in 21 days, but there's still set aside for those who did not make up the 50,000, who did not make up the 500,000, those who made between 500,001 and 1.5 million. That money's set aside separately.
I have a question back on the qualifications. Someone asked, this was a catering business, and they wanted specific information about defining payroll. In the FAQs, it talked a little bit about the ceiling, that you can't take more than $100,000 worth of the funds. And so that led them to believe that owners do have access to the funding, that it wasn't just payroll for people other than owners. And so they want clarity around that, whether or not that's the case. Because in a catering business, they're very much dependent upon the group business and gathering. And so this particular owner, probably like many others, has taken very little money out of that business at this point.
Well, yeah, payroll can be, no one person can make, you can make over $100,000, but we only pay up to $100,000. For say an employee makes $150,000, You can only claim 100,000 of the 150,000. That's what that meant. That's what that's meant for.
But it doesn't bar the
In order
ownership
to,
from being part of that payroll. Is that correct?
yeah, no, they can apply for the payroll. Yeah.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
because I was saying this PPP owners in PPP applied for it and got it. Some were like part of a corporation. They pay themselves, and that's okay to do that. And those owners who didn't pay themselves during this time, they can pay they should be able to pay their back pay.
Okay.
As long as you document it.
Okay. Perfect. So I have a clarifying question in the chat about the vehicle, and just wanting to make sure that they're understanding. They said that they had a delivery van that they were kind of limping along and getting ready to replace when the pandemic hit. And they have not done that yet, but they do want to do so. So they're asking the question about whether or not they could fund the replacement with these funds, or is it really just maintenance and operation that they could fund with the relief money?
Let me find that out. I'm on a call actually tomorrow with more information. I'll find that out tomorrow, and I'll have the answer for you on Friday.
Okay.
Fair enough?
That's fair. Okay, David, we will get back to you on that. All right, I see that we're cognizant of time. Is there anyone else who has a question that has been spurred by all of this? We'd be happy
And
to.
can I make a suggestion too, that restaurantssba.gov, you can send questions to that, and they've got an answer team there for things. So if you can't wait till Friday, and they want you to send questions, so they can actually update their FAQs and those type of things. So if you got questions that I may not have answered clearly, feel free to send that to them. That way they can update their FAQs for others that are saying the same, they have the same questions.
Okay, perfect. And Carrie put a question in the chat about being a little bit more specific on supplier costs. Are there any restrictions that you know of on food or alcohol purchases?
Not that I know of. I mean, again, I know obviously everything's gotta be legal, obviously, and the food, I'm not sure. I guess that's kind of an open-ended question. So if you get more specific, what do you mean? What are you concerned about as far as buying the food and alcohol? Because that seems to be a supply that you have to buy to keep your place running.
Yeah, Carrie, do you want to unmic and ask a little bit more specific?
Thank you so much. So that is anything we buy, like our materials, our our food, all our different suppliers, our beer, our liquor,
Yes,
our containers, as well as PPP. It doesn't anything we have to run the store on a regular.
I think that's a raw supply, and that would be covered. It's a raw supply that you have to run your business, so that should be covered.
Okay, that's great. I thought so. Just
I'll check on that.
Thank you.
Did that come through? I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry if it's not coming through clearly. I'm sorry about that. It might be the internet here at my house.
All right. Any other questions? I don't see any more in the chat. Is there anyone else? At this point, I'll just let you unmic and ask a question if you've got something else that you would like to hear from Mike while we've got him. This is kind of a rare opportunity to have the district head of the SBA. I'd say ask him anything, but you know, I didn't really ask his permission to do that.
I have a quick question.
Yes, hi.
Hi. If we own our business in the form of an LLC and it's a husband and wife, does that qualify for female owned?
Well, they looked at the different organization. An LLC does qualify. You're an LLC. I don't think it matters if you're a husband or wife. You're an LLC. That should qualify.
But isn't there preferential treatment for female in the first tranche of this?
Well, if you're a wife, if the company's owned 51% by the female, that would make you a priority. If you're 50-50,
I think we're 50-50 in this case.
That probably wouldn't count. Then it's got to be at least 51%.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
All right. Anyone else?
If they have any questions, send them to you, Tracy, and you can send them to me, and I'll try to have those answers by Friday.
Okay, we will certainly do that. And in the meantime, you know, I think the suggestion to put things at sba.gov is also a great suggestion. But feel free to send any other thoughts or suggestions to us here at the Chamber. You're welcome to send them to me. My email address, Celia, if you want to pop that in the chat, is tosborne@opchamber.org. On behalf of all of the other chambers and the Kansas City Restaurant Association, I want to thank you all very much for joining us on this call. Mike, especially, we want to appreciate you for reaching out and for all that you're doing to make sure that our restaurants and related businesses are as informed as possible so that we can get a head start and a jump on this relief fund. And for all of you, I know that you've got lots of friends in the business. Please let them know that our next session is Friday at 9 o'clock, and they can find the registration information on a number of websites, but they certainly can find it on ours, opchamber.org. They don't obviously have to be a member to access this registration link, and we encourage everyone to participate so that they're ready when these applications are available to everyone. Mike, final words of wisdom?
No, I know. If I didn't have the answer, I'll try to get those for you. This is going right. It's changing day by day on this particular fund. 28.6 sounds like a lot, but you never know if it's going to last. So just try to get and be as prepared as possible. Work with your accountants if you can, and just try to make sure your information is as complete as possible. Those who have gone through the process this last between 25 and 35 minutes to fill it out. That's for those who've done it in English. So it's not onerous, but it's important that you have your documentation ready when you get started.
Hey, I did have one quick. It's just a quick clarification, just a double check. You said that the funds that are distributed could be used for owner's compensation as long as they were documented, correct?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I needed. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate
it. Mike, I know we had a couple of CPAs on the line here, and we're certainly reaching out to all of our firms to make sure that they're aware, and I know that many of them are reaching out to their restaurants as well.
Can you, if one of those CPAs is on, can they explain to everybody what a comfort letter is? If there's any CPA on?
I think we've got several from Mize on. Are you all still on? I think we've had a few people drop off.
Okay. But maybe if they get on next time, we can tell what a comfort letter is.
Yeah, absolutely. I know I can't, so.
Okay.
All right, well, thank you all for joining us, Mike. We'll see you Friday morning. And
Thank you.
Everyone have a great week filling out your applications.
Okay, then good luck, everyone.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.